I've got this feeling.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and it was the textbook definition of winning ugly, but we banked the 4 points against a team that is up and coming and in form, and once again it was our miserly defence that shone and helped us to our 12th win for the season, enabling us to retain top spot for another week. Joining me tonight is long-time Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, everyone. And for this week, we've got 12 wins on the ladder on the positive side now, and for his own benefit, Andy is now banned from using the ladder predictor while we keep winning.
Yeah, everything went out the window from the first game of the round. I think with Geelong losing, it threw everything out. So we'll have to redo that show again with my new ladder predictor. And it was good that we did win because that sort of helped things out for us down the track. But unless we keep on winning, we can't drop games we're meant to win. And we'll talk about all that going forward tonight. Also joining us tonight, B-Man. Good evening, B-Man. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And yes, I thought the ladder predictor, you didn't factor in the COVID situation, which was really given how many different variables you did put into that ladder predictor. It's interesting you missed that one. So, yeah, we'll definitely have to do that one again.
Well, I have talked about my fears of COVID, and not fears of the virus, but fears of the footy shutting down, because it's a very real possibility. I don't, as we were sort of talking pre-show about this, but it's a real possibility. All the teams coming here that if something happens in Victoria, we're sort of running out of options. Perhaps we can all go to Tassie and hub there. I don't know.
A more positive spin on that is footy's coming back to where it belongs, and the VFL is back. So the D's might win a VFL grand final and an AFL grand final, the first club to have done both of them in the same season. So it could be super exciting having all the clubs in town.
Well, presumably the Adelaide teams will still be in Adelaide at the moment. So we might not get that Port Adelaide game in Melbourne, but depending on how long this thing goes on, maybe we'll get the Eagles at the G as an added benefit of this. But I think that's still a few weeks away. So I think we're in a lot of trouble, or Perth is in a lot of trouble if they're still having to play here.
I was looking forward to I've never been to Adelaide Oval, and I'm super keen to go to that Port D's game over there Saturday week, or Friday week, I should say. But good thing I didn't book my flights.
Are you able to go there at the moment? Is Victoria open to South Australia?
I think South Australia shut their borders to everyone in the whole world, including aliens so. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think they had shut their border, but I'm not sure to us. They have to everyone else in the country.
Maybe we should just give up doing predictions of any sort with this.
Especially with COVID.
1 week at a time. 1 week at a time,
yes.
Things can change very, very quickly. Footy predictions, COVID predictions, it's all out the window. Well, let's talk about this game. In previous years, Melbourne teams would have allowed one loss to turn into a slump, but I think it's hardening. The hardening thing is that we've been able to achieve this year is finding ways to win, and the old Melbourne would have fallen to a side that got a run of goals on if once they got a sniff. Certainly the Melbourne of 2019 and 2020, and even at times the Melbourne of 2018, we probably would have not been able to maintain a lead in the final quarter. We've talked about this for years on the podcast, that we'd bleed goals and that we just couldn't stem the flow. But that didn't happen this week. George, how did you feel going to the last quarter? And I'll ask you as well, Bim, man. I was sort of confident going into the last quarter, but once they kicked a few goals, that confidence started to wane. How were you, George?
The last quarter was a little bit different because being a football supporter of any side, when your side's only 2 goals up, there's always the chance that you could lose the game. But it doesn't certainly seem to be the case with this Melbourne side. Surprisingly, when it was only about 4 or 5 minutes into the game itself in the first quarter, I was quite certain that we'd actually win this, and the reason I say that was because already I could see the structures on which this team is built, and the defensive structures in particular, they were already working. Essendon, in contrast, had no such system whatsoever. Their defensive structures are all about individuals. They haven't developed it yet. They haven't got the personnel to be able to implement it. And it was a real contrast even very early on in the game. We'll talk about their fans
Yes.
a little bit later on, but the ones that were around me in that first quarter were already screaming, "Stop kicking it to Lever and May." Surprisingly, the worst offenders were the ones getting the most possessions. The Merritts and the Parish just kept on kicking the ball forward, lots of possessions, but they kept kicking it straight onto the headers of Lever and May and the other backmen, and it just didn't hurt them, and the ball just kept coming out. Now, we didn't capitalise all that well as a result of that for a start off, but we're not worried about the clearances and the number of times the opposition get it. It's what's done with it and what the effects are. And like I said, from a very early stage, we had control of that game from what I could see, and it just continued for the rest of the game. And even though it was only a couple of goals in the end, it could well have been a lot more than that, but I don't think it was ever going to get less than that.
Big man, how were your nerves going into that last, or even in that last quarter?
Pretty much the same as George. I mean, exactly right. When you get to 12 points, a bit of luck here or there can cause it. But they were lucky to be within 12 points. I'd never sort of thought otherwise. I was really confident right through that game. In fact, I was confident 2 or 3 minutes in, just because we clearly brought our intensity. And we were phenomenal. And all credit to Essendon. I thought they were terrific as well with their pressure. But, if Tipper had got a free kick, which, to be honest, he should have got one, Harms dropped that red hot. I think if he'd got that, he can't really kick over a jam tin, so he was no guarantee of getting it. But if that free had been paid, he would have been kicking for about 40. If he got the goal, they would have been within 5 points, I think, or 6 points at that point. So, but having said that, I thought we played really solid in those last 4 or 5 minutes, and we sucked so much time out of the clock. So even though 2 goals ordinarily, is nothing in footy, obviously, it is against us, particularly the way we're playing. And I thought it was interesting, George, them kicking. I just, before we started, I watched the first half. I haven't watched the replay yet, but I watched the first half this evening. And it's easier said than done to stop kicking it long, because if it's drilled into their model that's what they do. They've got some similarities to us, Essendon. They like to get territory too. So part of that is, if you don't have another option and you're under pressure, which we were doing, you get it long. You get it 40, 50 metres down. There's no point kicking sideways and losing it 20 metres to your left or right, because you're turning over in a difficult spot. So if their model is to under pressure look to kick it long into their forward line and then try to win that aerial contest from there, it's really hard on the fly to start kicking lateral kicks inboard, or particularly because we just completely took away the corridor. The commentators kept on saying, "Oh, corridor," but really they only got it in that corridor a couple of times. And for me, it felt like a really quintessential 2021 Demons game, because they were lucky to get a 10-point break. We dominated that first quarter. They only had, I think we had 11, or maybe 17 inside 50s. They had 5 or 6, and they scored from 3 of them, and including the sort of fluky goal, really, from good goal from Stringer from 60 metres out. Then in the second quarter, they actually dominated the first half of that quarter. But why it was such a Melbourne performance is that they just could not penetrate. They could not score. They got one goal, which was that fluky kick, a brilliant bit of play by the young fella on the goal line. But try as they might, they just couldn't penetrate our defensive wall. And that's really, that point is where we won the game, because they needed to jump out to a 3-4 goal lead at that point to take advantage. But it just really struck me is that we dominated the first quarter. We really didn't take advantage. We missed a lot of easy shots. We missed a lot of inside 50 targets. When they had their momentum, which a team will always get, they just couldn't put any scoreboard pressure on us. And when they failed to do so, that was game over. So I thought they were really smart in that last 10 minutes, and they've done that really well, not just this season. They did it a number of times last year where they used that last 10 minutes really smart and took time out of the clock and made it really difficult for the opposition to score.
Let's talk about that magnificent defence and talk about defence, not our defensive system yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. Without the likes of May and Lever, who had 18 intercepts between them, the return of form by Christian Salem, a fantastic shutdown role by Hunt on McDonald, Tipperwoody, cameos from Hibberd, who I thought did well when Stringer sort of went forward, Rivers and Petty. Without these guys, we surely probably would have lost this match. That back six, back seven is so important and is really the standout at the moment in our team. I mean, we've got obviously a great midfield, but this back 6 or 7 players is just solid, and the fact that they're getting to play, stringing a lot of games together is fantastic, and I'm loving watching it, George.
Yeah, isn't it fantastic? The other thing is that was really evident in this game was while May had 8 intercepts and Lever had 10, the rest of the backmen were doing extraordinarily well as those two, which are now become our mainstays, of course. But Hunt had 6 intercepts, Rivers had 5, Hibberd had 5, Salem had 4. It was really quite easy to understand. Well, like I said, all these Essendon fans were screaming around me, "Stop kicking it to them! Stop kicking it to them!" But these guys were just intercepting everything that came in.
And even Langdon, who we've been very had a lot of praise for, had 6 as well. So.
Yeah. And then the other thing was it just kept coming out the same way all the time. Langdon in particular, Brayshaw a couple of occasions, but the ball would go to Salem. Salem would deliver it to Langdon. Langdon would deliver it up to the forward line. It was just relentless. Just this constant turning back of the tide of Essendon as they came down. And then the same thing had happened. Essendon would attack and they'd do exactly the same thing again. And they just kept on kicking it to our guys. And our guys kept picking it up and sending it straight back the opposite direction. The real pity was that we weren't able to capitalise, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But really, we should have been given the number of forward entries that we had and the number of marks that we're able to take inside 50. We really should have capitalised a lot more. But, hey, we won the game, but it was built on this fantastic defence that we have.
Yeah, we'll talk about that defensive all-team defence and in a minute, I know, but this was one for the true believers for the back 6. There's games where, it's really evident that all-team pressure. This game was one such example, but they were extraordinary, weren't they? That was as good a defensive back 6 performance as, geez, I was trying to think afterwards. I can't, it's hard to think backwards, but, Sean White and Danny Hughes and sort of Rivers and those sorts of players, individuals. But I can't think of a back 6 who are so well drilled, and they just have such confidence in each other about where they, what the next handball. And they've, I don't know if you guys sort of agree, but it feels like they've if anything, they've become more sort of comfortable holding the ball and taking on the tackler, or it's rare for them to be rushed. At one point, Hibberd fumbled the ball deep, and it was a rare it just struck me as a rare thing to happen in our back 6. Sure. And I thought Essendon's pressure was fantastic. They were really, tackling hard and in it. But, also you get Jordan, and I think Brayshaw has been terrific the last couple of weeks. Langdon, who didn't do it so much this game, but pushing back, even Spargo pushing back into the defence to help out. But that back 6 were fantastic. And I'm glad you mentioned Hunt, George, because I thought that he played great at the last 2 games. I thought he was good against Collingwood, terrific the week before. But he was just about his best game for the season. I thought his run was there. He looks to get it and really move forward when he can. He had 11 kicks, 7 handballs, so 18 possessions. That's great for him. Took 4 marks, included a couple of really good ones, and he had 6 tackles. So he was second only to Jordan, who for a young fellow, he had 9 tackles, Jordan, which is just amazing. And quite a few of them were in the back half. But Hunt getting 6 tackles back there is fantastic. The other one I thought Salem was back to his best. And he was terrific, and I really love the way he's changed his game to, he rarely does, unless he's under pressure and doesn't have another option, he rarely does those lateral 10, 15, 20-metre kicks anymore. He really gets good distance, and in fact, the whole team do. We very rarely go back. It was interesting. We switched a few times this week, and it sort of was unusual that we did, but we very rarely, go sideways too often or backwards. And he's really become an important player in the way. He ended up 30 possessions, Salem. He had 10 marks, 3 tackles himself. Just fantastic performance back there.
Well, let's go into our defensive system. We've got some audio to play. This is Max. We sort of alluded to it when we played some audio of Max the other week, and he was talking about Troy Chaplin sort of drumming home that defensive thing. And this clip gives a little bit more insight into that. So I'll play that now before we chat about it.
So, Max, explain team defence to us. Explain team defence to us. You've got, you mentioned they're making the ground small. What actually is that, and how does that happen?
I'm glad you went into that question a bit more, because I was going to be a smart ass and just say it's defending as a team.
I would have appreciated that answer.
But you gave me a second part of that question, which is good. No, look, it's obviously the most common place for the other team to have the ball is like the half-back line. That's where a lot of turnovers happen. So team defence sort of starts from there, and it's being able to get your forwards up to be able to help defend, and the mids shutting out the other midfielders and defenders shutting out their players. Like it's pretty easy the same part. Like you're basically focusing on your man, and then once you got that covered, you can help out someone else. So there's not that much science to it, but it goes away from what you're taught as a junior. Junior, you hardly even taught defence as a junior. You're just taught to chase the ball, and then you drill this team defence for 4 or 5 years like Troy Chaplin has been doing as our back coach, and it's finally clicked.
So why is it finally clicked? Is it the fitness of the team? Is it the maturity of the team? How does it just all of a sudden come together?
I mean, that point that I said about Chappie, Troy Chaplin's been our back coach for 4 or 5 years, and he's literally reiterated the same point for those 4 or 5 years. So he would have been so frustrated when it wasn't just happening after 1, 2, 3 years. And even last year we showed it for a lot of games, and then we couldn't keep it going. And this year it just seems like a little bit of maturity, maybe what you said there, Maisie, and the guys have played a lot of footy together. The back 7 have actually played a lot of footy together. They've apart from maybe Harry Petty, who's just come in, but so yeah, that plus with a little bit of maturity, and then just Chappie just reiterated the same point over and over again.
Yeah, I think it's one of the other points to take away from that is the fact that they're all, and you said that before, Big Man, that they're all playing together, as in the same back 6 week after week after week, and I think that's really important. And you talked about in previous years just sort of individuals here and there, but this year it's sort of a real group effort doing exactly what they need to do. And our defensive system held up well this week, allowed us to strangle and absorb the pressure. And make no mistake, you can talk about winning ugly, but if not for our superior defensive structures, not just from the back 6, but the forwards going up and helping out, and everyone playing their role, we might not be talking about winning at all. So it's a great thing to see. George?
Yeah, I think it was a good point that Max made again about Chappie banging on for a couple of years about this. When you look back at last year, I think May and Lever only managed 6 games together as when they either or both weren't injured at some stage. And 2019, we all know, was a disastrous year in terms of injuries. But suddenly you get that solid continuity and reliability that comes from those 2 big bodies down there. But also with the rest of the defensive structures and the people involved in it are seeing the results from it. You know, that we're sitting with 12 wins. This is working really, really well for us at the moment. So it feeds off itself as it becomes self-fulfilling. So, fabulous to see in action. I disagree a little bit with Max when he says it finishes up at the half-back line. I think we actually start at the half-forward line. The defensive structures force the players out to the wings, force them away from the corridor, force them into that down-the-line kick, force them into a situation where they don't want to be. And that's what really starts it. And then we see the mopping up exercises occurring with the Levers and Mays and a few others in this game down the back line.
Yeah, it's really interesting, though, sort of reflecting last week, talking about the comparison to basketball, because good defensive systems do exactly that, don't they, George? In basketball, is they force oppositions to parts of the court where it's difficult to get out of. And how often do you see opposition players sort of on their half-back line, looking up the line? They've got Max, they've got Jackson up ahead, they've potentially got Tommy McDonald up ahead, not knowing where to go and hesitating. Now, it's really important, I think, to sort of consider the form Essendon had been in coming into that game. They won 5 from 7, I think, 5 from the last 7.
5 from the last 6, yeah.
Yeah, and 2, the second highest scoring team in the league. They love to move it, bounce it fast. They go for the corridor, they play through the corridor. They've got like a hybrid model between the sort of aggressive ball movement of the Dogs and a very Melbourne-like sort of model of territory, and sort of trying to avoid short chipping it around like a Collingwood team does. But you could see how often they were struggling to know what to do. And then the other option is to bail out and go to the to try and cross into the centre. And it's they don't like to chip and hold it like Collingwood do. So the option that they would prefer, and what they do to other teams, is to take that kick on into the centre. But they look up and they know that they can't take that risk. And if they do, we're almost wanting them to daring them to take that, because when they do, we so often turn it over. We had a real focus on our defensive effort this week and our all-team defence. There was no way the club was going to allow those easy kicks that Garbo talked about last week, for instance, where that chip up to the 50-metre line and letting them move it out. We were pressing right up on them. And it's really it's the same what we did to the Dogs. We're challenging them almost, or saying, go for it. If you want to take that kick onto the centre, you've got to kick it around Viney, you've got to kick it over the top of Jordan, you've got to somehow get it through Oliver. When it comes to crunch under pressure, players default to down the line. And when they do, the game's then on our terms, and we mop it up at the half-back line. Hence all of our intercept marking. That's why people go, well, why do they keep kicking it? Because they don't really have another option. And so, it was so evident we were on defensively, and really, as we've talked about, that's everyone playing their role, everyone running, everyone crossing when they do get a switch, everyone sort of being switched on and knowing what they're doing. That it just makes us super hard to play against. And when we're on like that, teams are going to struggle to kick a winning score. I don't care which team it is; they're all going to struggle in that. And we've got a big body of work to show that even the best teams struggle to put a score on the board against us.
If you want to join us tonight, 0390163666. That's 0390163666. Skype us at Demonland31. Join us in the chat room, demonland.com/podcast. Midfield, Max dominated the hitouts with 32, but the Essendon mids dominated the possession count. And if you take a look at the Dons stoppage setups, a lot of their players were on the outside and often left unattended, and were allowed to effectively walk out of the contest too easily. Luckily, our team's defensive setup, which we were just talking about, was such that the opposition was stalled, having to either look sideways, go backwards, or just dump kick it forward, which invariably landed back in our hands. My concern is, and B-Man, you just said it's not a concern of yours, but if we try that against the Eagles or Port, who perhaps may have a more potent forward line, certainly the Eagles, I reckon, do, our systems might not be able to save us if we're too loose at the stoppages. Big man, you're not worried about that. Still not worried about that against an Eagles?
Well, it depends on what you mean by loose at the stoppages. I think, again, that goes back to the...
well, if we don't win the stoppages, if it's coming out like it did, like Essendon took it out quite a lot of times.
Yeah, but if you look where they get... I mean, that's why they didn't... I mean, I was, watching it, they talk about Merritt. He had 10 possessions inside the first 10 minutes. Who cares? Yeah. They didn't score a goal in that period of time. It's a bit like when we played, I think it was Hawthorn and Mitchell racked up the possessions. They don't care about it. And so they don't care if they lose a stoppage where a Merritt wins it on the defensive side of the contest and under pressure, dump kicks it to Lever. That's my whole point that I've been, you can't praise Lever and May and our 15 intercepts that we got. And not recognise the reason we get it is because when we do lose a stoppage, where it's on the offensive side of the contest and we're putting the ball carrier under so much pressure, they have no option but to dump kick it into our forward line. The only other option they have is to take a risky kick on the corridor, which we pick off and cause a turnover and win the ball at our half forward line. It's two elements of our game plan. We beat teams when we mark on the half-back flank and intercept, and we do that by, when they win a stoppage, by putting them under a whole lot of pressure so that they've got no option but to dump kick it into our forward line. It happened again. We're happy with that. We're happy he could have 50 possessions. 25 of them are kicked to Steve May.
We had some audio. Is that where you want to play? We had the Goody.
This would be a good time.
Good time.
No, my prodigising about the stoppages and clearances. Yes, this would be a very good time, Andy.
Is there anything you need to preface it with?
No, this was just that this is from the press conference straight after the game, and it feels to me in his understated way, this Goodwin's sort of got a similar level of fatigue with this question about stoppages. If you can see the vision, he sort of looks a bit weary as he answers this. So when you're hearing it, sort of picture a Goody with sort of a bit of a resigned look on his face as he's talking.
All right, I'll put my my questioning of our clearance work away, and maybe we can bring it back if I have to. All right, here we go.
I don't think centre bounce clearances are probably one of your strengths this year, but I think you broke even tonight and outscored them from centre bounce. Was that sort of pleasing? Is that sort of bucking the trend a little bit?
It's an area of the game that we're working really strongly on. We think we've got the weapons to be able to maximise that area of the ground. But one thing's to win clearance, the other thing's to score from it. And tonight, we were able to do that, and that was really pleasing.
Short, sharp, direct. All right.
Yeah, and the point he's making is what I've been banging on about. It's not how many clearances you win or lose. It's how many clearances you score from and what happens after you win or lose it. So if we set up and we win it, and you could see how effective we were, we didn't actually take full advantage of it in terms of kicking goals, but we got quite a few scoring chains from it where we get clean out of the centre. That's what they're looking for. That's the gold standard. If in doing so, in creating them, you're going to lose some. It's like the old, you can't, make a cake without breaking some eggs. The key is when we do lose them, that they don't score off them. They dump kick it to us, and that's what was happening. So as Goody points out, is it's not about the clearances. It's about what happens with them, and if you score from them, that's what he wants to see more of, not more clearances from which you get a scoring chain that starts. And that's what we got on Saturday. They got nothing. They got bugger all, and they're a good clearance side. They're an okay clearance side. They got nothing from stoppages or clearances in terms of their scores.
George, anything you want to add to that before I talk about the mids in general?
No, I just had some things to talk about the mids in general. So when you're finished your bit.
Yep, I was just going to talk about individuals, but all sort of at once. Oliver with his 34 possessions, 15 contested, 7 clearances, 7 score involvements. Harms, 27 possessions, 12 contested, 2 clearances, 5 scoring involvements. Then the 1 goal to Petrarca, 26 possessions, 12 contested, 2 clearances, 8 score involvement, 2 clutch goals. They probably were both clutch goals. We really needed them, particularly that one on the boundary when he gave the little wave to the Essendon supporters. I was actually quite amused. I don't know if you saw the Essendon supporter who reacted to him waving, was sort of motioning to the umpire as if the umpire was going to award the guy in the crowd a free kick for that.
He was in shock, wasn't he? I loved his expression.
He was like, hey,
Goal.
what are you doing? Yeah. And then James Jordan, remarkable, 21 possessions, 2 goals from, I believe, George, you mentioned that he only played 60% game time. That's just amazing.
That's truly amazing, and it caused me to have a look at what was actually going on with the game time, and it was interesting when I had a look at that. Essendon only had Ridley as the only player in their side who had more than 90% game time, whereas Melbourne had 7 players who were over 90% game time. So what we're actually doing is, firstly, we're doing 2 things, I think. We're protecting people like Jordan and Jackson and Rivers, because they're all young players. You know, they haven't got the bodies. They've got a long season to go through. So we're giving them less on-ground time compared to the more experienced bodies, which is great. We're not going to burn them out. But the other thing that we're enabling the mids to do is, because they're getting these rests, they're actually able to run harder, which is more beneficial to us overall. So you're getting the interchanges going through. We actually used 74 out of the possible 75 interchanges. Essendon only used 69. So our guys were being given the rest, but able to run harder, and also giving our younger players the rest. So I think it's a significant thing that we're actually doing that most people probably wouldn't notice during the game. It's only when you get to the end of the game that you pick up these little things. We did have a couple of stuff-ups with the interchange. We were twice warned and got penalised ultimately for a 6-6.
Cost us a goal.
Yeah, it cost us a goal. I don't know what was going on. That wasn't the only one. There was the 2 which ultimately got the free kick for and caused a goal. But there are a couple of others as well. People not coming off the ground at the right time, or not getting people on at the right time. Brayshaw was forced into the middle a couple of times that I saw, because the other mid who would have otherwise been there wasn't on the ground. So I don't know what was going on with the interchange bench, but you can't afford to give away a 6-6-6 penalty as we saw. It just completely leaves the defence exposed, because if the ball comes out, it goes straight down the other end really quickly, and as we saw, gave them that goal. So hopefully they'll pick up on that. But yeah, it's really interesting to see the way that we're protecting our players and the way we're best utilising the interchange areas and the time on ground with these players.
Yeah, the first one, which you don't get penalised, was Harms, and he came onto the ground really, really late from the goal when you've got to be in the 50-metre arc. And I don't know what happened there. You obviously you got to make a call, I think, and not bring him on, because it was very, very close to them balling up, and he sort of ran, tried to get there and didn't make it in time. So that is a balls up. I think the other one was maybe Brayshaw coming on to the wing, so he didn't have that far to go. But again, must have come on quite late in that break. So they've really got to sharpen that up, because it cost us a goal.
Yeah, exactly.
I was gonna. I had that on my notes last week, George, about what's different this year, and some sort of, or what are sort of the interesting tactical stuff that they're doing. And I reckon that's a really interesting one. That time stuff. You've made that point a few times. The way they've got a number of players. It'd be 5, 6, 7 playing 90. Some of them 95% plus game time, and then as you say, the 50%. 60%. What was Viney Do you know?
74%, I believe. Yes, it is 74%. I'll look that up because I'll ask you about Viney in a minute. Yeah.
I reckon that's a really interesting. I'd be really curious to know if other teams are doing it. I mean, I guess other teams have been experimenting, but I'm wondering whether that's sort of something Melbourne's a unique thing that, because we do it every week. It's a planned thing. It's not a sort of random, when at the beginning of the season, you could probably maybe think it's just sort of the way it's panned out, but really it's been consistent right across the season, hasn't it?
Well, Jordan's been playing pretty much around that 60% game time the whole year. So they've obviously got that plan for him, obviously, so that he can play more of the season, so his younger body, fit in terms of fitness, rather than having to probably give him a break in the resis. So, yeah, that's obviously a tactic.
Amazing.
Just on Jordan, I pumped up his stats because I realised I was reading the stats from the St Kilda game before. So he didn't quite have as many tackles as that. Sorry about that, James.
How many did he have? He only had 3, so I think you said he had
3.
9.
Yeah, so, I gave him 3 times his total. But he crunched a few, didn't he? Those 3 were tough. They were worth 9.
Yeah, he is really productive, even though he might be only on the ground for 62% of the time. He is really productive when he's out there, which is exactly what you want to see in a young player. And it fits in nicely with the output that the rest of the mids are expected to produce as well. So, it's working very, very well.
And he's a really good... I reckon I really like him in the same team as Viney because I love Viney and, he's gone up in my estimation a lot this year in terms of his importance to the team for a whole range of reasons. But he, in some ways, is not a natural footballer, it feels like. He makes sort of, his decisions sometimes leave a bit to be desired in terms of sort of taking too much on. But Jordan's like his yang to his yin because Jordan is similarly tough, tackles hard, loves to get in there, but has a really unique dual sort of set of, he's good on the inside, but he's excellent on the outside. But what I love about Jordan is he makes great decisions under pressure. Things like when knowing when to jam and on the boot, when to release it. He handballs. When he handballs, it's always to his teammates' advantage. He's just such a natural footballer. And, I mean, I'm just so thrilled. It's like suddenly finding a $50 note, underneath your bed because, I had no sense really, to be honest, how good he was last season.
Only 50? I think he's 100.
And just on Jordan, in that interview with Max Gordon, I've said this before, it's a great interview. It's every 2 weeks he's on RSN. It's from 7 to 7:30 or 10 past 7 to 7:30. I didn't realise, but they said they talked about Jordan at length in this morning's interview with him, and he was delisted, they said, for a 2-day period. They took him off the rookie list. I'd have to listen to it again, where there was a window of time where other clubs could have picked him up. Now, presumably, they would have been warned off and they couldn't do it. But there was a period where he came off the list, where they put him on the long-term injury list after that injury that he had in the gym, and that he got re-rookied. Obviously they're wanting to keep him. But yeah, he's just a gun, isn't he?
Is he a chance in this rising star? Because
that was what they were talking about, and he's like $8 for the rising star.
Because I feel he's not getting the credit that he deserves in the wider football. No. That's preaching to the choir. I'm talking about in the wider football community. I don't think he's getting
his chance in the rising star is that, from memory, it's voted on by footballers and media people, and he's the sort of player that that footballers love because, like I was saying, he's a natural footballer. He makes good decisions, and he's more likely to jump to their attention than maybe to the general public. The young Essendon player's favourite for the rising star.
If you look at their stats, and it's not just done on one weekend, Jordan's blown him out of the park in terms of stats this week.
Well, so they talked about the rising stars. Jordan, this year we've had Jordan,
Rivers. And Jackson.
Sparrow's still eligible apparently. So we might end up having 4 rising star nominations, which is incredible for a team on top of the ladder.
It's worthwhile remembering Rivers as well. Again, he's in the same scenario, low ground time, but actually producing an awful lot when he is on the ground. So we may not be getting the media coverage, but these guys are flying beautifully under the radar. They are just A-grade players. And when the media eventually wakes up, they'll go, "Where have you been hiding these players?" It's obvious to us at the moment, but their time will come.
And I think it's an interesting point too you make, George, about the way that they've engineered the time, because as you say, for some of the players, we talk about this with Melksham, but it's probably more evident for Rivers, is they want him to play a pretty ballistic style where he's aggressive and he takes the game on. And in order for him to be at that level, he probably needs to be at 50, 60% game time at this point in his career. He's not going to be playing that if he's 80, 90%, is he? He's going to be running out of gas.
Mm.
Yeah, he's played 70, and what did we say? Jordan was 62% and Sparrow 50%. Yeah, let's move on. What did you guys make of Viney's game? Look, it was quieter as a midfielder with 17 disposals from 74% game time, but absolutely should be better for the run. George?
To me, he looked a little bit underdone. Not surprisingly, he's been out for a while. But what he brought to the game was just that strength and that unwillingness to take the step backwards. I can't remember which Essendon player it was. I think it might have been Merritt tried to take him on at one point and got completely put on his.
It was Smith, Devon Smith.
Devon Smith, that's right. Yeah, got completely put on his tail. That just sends the message to the rest of the midfield. You know, Viney's back. He's back in a big way. And other midfielders for the opposition will be looking sideways and not doing things that would have been otherwise able to get away with. He's a big factor in the second half of this season for us, and let's hope he is able to stay on the ground and no more injuries arise.
Man, anything more with Viney?
Oh, it's just great to have him back. He was a bit rusty, wasn't he? He's got very little depth on his kicking. I mean, in many ways, he's a limited footballer. But as I said, he's gone way up in my estimation. And as much as anything, it was really evident, I think, as I said last week, that how much we've missed him. With a game under his belt, another game next week, you know, he's a really important piece to the puzzle. And as I said last week, it allows him in the middle, allows Jordan to go back and be a more damaging player on the outside. And I think that it also means that, you know, when we do lose those clearances, he's a player who can really get in and not only sort of impact defensively, but exactly like he did with Devon Smith, he can really wear down opposition mids just through his physicality. I mean, there's very few players that I can recall at the D's who have played with just sort of such relentless physicality and aggression at the ball carrier. He gets down low, he drives, he's got good technique in his tackling. He would have been a terrific rugby player, I reckon. I'm rapt to have him back. Give him 2-3 weeks to get up to speed. He was an important player on the weekend, and he'll just get more important as the weeks go past, I think.
Let's talk that forward line. What is going on with our forward line? We partly got our wish with Wiedemann being dropped, and there was the hope that Ben Brown would get his opportunity, and perhaps the lack of matches for Casey as a result of COVID meant that the coaching staff wanted to give him a full game in the twos before getting recalled. However, This week, our forward line was screaming out for another tall forward who can lead and kick goals from outside 50 or even on 50. I thought we were undermanned in the tall stocks up forward, and T-Mac was left all on his lonesome in that department. Boys, what happened? Why wasn't he selected? B-Man, you want to take that?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. I reckon, well, on Brown, I watched the VFL game, and it's on. If anyone wants to watch the replay, you can catch it on 7 Play, or you just got to sort of open a free account, and that game's on there. It's good to watch. I suspect that he's watching that. He looked better, and Richardson did the review of it. He sort of picked out 6 players to talk about. Brown was one of them. And he emphasised in that whilst the 5 goals were great, that what was really good was that he was moving well. So I suspect that he wasn't in because he's not yet fit enough or mobile enough for the club. And really the issue is we've talked about this, but it's not just the sort of inside 50 pressure. You can't have a player that the defenders can run off. As much as he would have brought the ball to ground, if he's not able to keep up with a defender, they'll just park a fast defender on him and run off him all day, or not even a fast one necessarily. So I suspect that's the reason. My feeling is pretty strong watching that game is he may not even get picked this week, but they'll look to bring him in against Port. I reckon my gut feeling is they want to get him rock hard fit and as mobile as possible, and he's the one that's going to come in. And they played Weed in that VFL game in very much the Tom McDonald role, and I reckon, and he looked great. He worked hard. He was good. Weedman in that game, I thought, and I reckon that's the role. If he's going to come back in Weed, it'll be in the Tom McDonald role, and only then if something really, if God forbid, T-Mac has an injury or his form just completely drops away. But on the forward line, I think it's under. We had 10 inside 50 marks. I think they only had 3. So the forward line functioned pretty well. It's just that we didn't take our chances. And in addition to those 10 marks we had inside 50, and there was a clear effort to make that short 30-40 kick to the sort of into that zone about 30 metre, a band across 30 metres out. So they were looking for that short lateral kick. The best one of the day was Fritsch, who did a beautiful lateral kick, I think, to Petrarca that set up his second goal. That was a really important goal. That was the one they were looking for all game. But in addition to the 10 marks, many of which were that type of kick that we got inside 50, they must have missed 4 or 5 players completely open. Petrarca missed 2, and one of them was a shocker. I saw it before we came on. Free had Tom McDonald, completely free, no one around him for 20 metres, and missed him. Put it over. He was only 15 metres away, put it over his head. So there were a number of them. So the forward line actually didn't, despite our low score, wasn't actually that ineffective, I thought. It worked pretty well, that small to medium forward line.
It wasn't so much the low score, because had we kicked straight, the score wouldn't have been lower. I mean, our delivery, I thought, in the first half into the forward 50 was atrocious. I thought it improved marketably in the third. We just couldn't nail our shots, which if we converted the set shots from T-Mac, Fritsch, Harms, as you mentioned, if we had been able to kick it actually to some of our forwards, we would not even be having a conversation about winning ugly, because the game would not have got that close. I think we would have been much further in front. Take 14-9 instead of 9-14, and it's a different
exactly.
It's a different outcome, a much different outcome, and wasn't just
Sorry, and there was a point where, as much as I don't know if we'll talk about it, but as much as the Essendon fans were going bananas with the umpires, there was a point in the game that game could have easily blown out to a 30-point win, easy. In fact, I expected it would when we were running on top of the ground and they were starting to run in quicksand, and we broke, and we had the free kick that we moved it down the ground. The free kick that was paid against T-Mac for in the back, which should have been holding the ball. It was a terrible decision. He got up expecting to get the ball. We were free. the ball was free. That would have, if we got the free, it would have been an advantage call, and it would have run into an open goal because I think I wasn't at the ground, unfortunately, but I think there was no one between whoever got the ball forward of T-Mac and the goal. So that would have taken it out to, I think, maybe 24 points, and then I just think the back would have been broken of Essendon. So they got a couple of goals after that. So we could have easily busted that game open, and we wouldn't be talking about the forward line as much.
One thing, sorry, Andy. One thing I think we might have learnt is that resting rucks aren't full forwards. Despite what we might think, Gawn was spending most of his time resting in, when he was resting, was in the back line. Jackson was playing more full forward, but full forwards know how to run leading patterns, and I don't know that we see those sort of leading patterns, particularly in a young ruckman like Jackson. He just doesn't know how to do them. He's a great individual player. He's a big threat down there, but we really need a full forward down there. We just can't leave it to Tommy Mack to be trying to do the whole lot on his own. The other thing was T-Mac was doing the forward rucking, which I just find is incomprehensible. You know, if you've got a full forward, put the full forward in there. If you've got a resting ruck, you should be using the resting ruck as the ruck. But we seriously lack some height there at time in the forward line, again, which would be solved if you had a Wiedemann or a Brown down there. I remember at one stage Langdon was running in from the wing with the ball looking for a leading target, and he had number 30, 31 and 32 sitting at the 50-metre line. And the Essendon defenders just picked them off quite easily. You just needed someone with a bit of height there. And ultimately we're going to have to get, I suspect, Ben Brown in there as soon as possible. We just need to get him in there, get the games into him, even if he's not totally fit, which Greg Stafford alluded to in his interview today. He basically didn't have a pre-season. They're trying to get him up to the standard, but the sooner we get him in there, I think he'll get the fitness levels. A good number of his goals came from at the Casey game this week, came from on-ground work. They weren't. I think there was only one from a marking situation, but the others he was actually running and picking the ball up, and it'll be interesting to see whether they think that he is at that level this week.
Yeah, I think all the messaging, if you sort of add all the sort of comments together from players and coaching, is that they're heading towards Ben Brown, and that they want a big. Even Max said this morning in his interview that, you know, you need a big forward come finals time. I think not so much, you know, the point I heard was made, I think, on that first crack show that, in fact, big forwards don't kick many goals in pressure finals. But what they do, as you're pointing out, George, is bring it to the ground, don't they? And that's what, you know, under pressure, you need long kicks. You've got to have a player to bring it to ground. You know, when there's, you know, you can't finesse it too much in a high pressure final, and so your first default is kicking long to your big. I just think they want to get him cherry ripe. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't play him this week. You know, Phil Davis is, I guess, their only big. I know they're not too bad. GWS are down back, but I reckon I might wait one more week and bring him against Port. I watched the game. He's sort of an interesting. He kicked 5-3, I think. So you know, and still didn't look that impressive. He looked a bit slow, but I tell you, it's just a joy to watch someone. You know, his run up kills you, but he's such a good kick. And there was sort of a case study of the two, of Wiedemann and Brown. They both kicked from almost exactly the same spot. There was a tricky wind at Casey, and Wiedemann, who's got not a bad technique, he tried to overcompensate for the wind and dragged it to the left, as he often does. But Brown is so confident in his technique. He started from about 40 metres out on a slight angle, started to the right of the post, knowing what the wind would do, and the wind brought it back and he kicked it. You know, so many players would start it at the middle and then it missed to the left, just like Wiedemann did. He's just a beautiful kick of the footy. And, you know, as we've talked about, you've just got to take your chances sometimes. And so that's really his ace in his pack in some respects, is that if he does get chances, he'll kick his 2-3 goals almost, you know, certainly with the amount of inside 50s that we get.
So Ben Brown is used to that Tasmanian wind, so perhaps we need to hub in Tasmania.
No.
No more predictions, Andy.
No.
Now, was it just me, or were our players failing to make the distance from 50 metres out? T-Mac didn't even get to the goal line. Someone else did it as well. And I think it wasn't until Sparrow in the last quarter that we were sort of able to kick a long goal. Not sure.
That was a good kick too, wasn't it? Like he really, he was one of the few players I've seen use that stand rule really smart there. Like some players that seems to throw out their technique, but he just went around and got that extra distance and really nailed it. But yeah, Spargo, he just struggles, doesn't he, from anywhere outside 30, just about.
That was that Sparrow goal, and I'm glad you called him Sparrow too, Ben Man, this week. That was right in front of me where I was. But what was really impressive about that was Brayshaw kicked it to him. He was the only one available. And I thought, he's kicked it to the smallest man in the forward line at the moment. But as it turned out, he was the best kick for the goals from that position. But there were no other options. It was just a brilliant kick from Brayshaw to get it to him in the first place.
It was a good mark too, wasn't it? He used his body really well, and that's right. That I thought. Brayshaw's kicking has improved, was the best it's been all season. And that kick, you're 100% right, George. What was great about that is that he put it to Sparrow's advantage, put it out to his right, enabled him to keep him underneath the ball. That's the thing that anyone wants, to give, to maximise the chance that you're going to mark it. I thought he had a neat game, and that was a really important goal, the timing of that. Just back on Brown, I think you make a good point, George, about T-Mac. And the worry I have about T-Mac being the key forward is that he really needs the second defender. And he's better. He's at his best when he's leading up almost to the wing on those long leads. That's where he's at his best. He's not a true full forward as such. He struggled big time last year when the best defender went onto him. So, there's no chance that the best defender, big defender, isn't going to go to Brown if Brown plays, which means that the second best talk's going to go to T-Mac. And then that T-Mac can use his aerobic ability to drag that player up and down the ground. So, I think that's, they'll definitely want Brown in, I suspect.
Now let's talk those umpiring, the controversial free kicks or non-free kicks. What are your takes on those that weren't paid, and some that were? The Tipper Moody tackle on Harms, and I guess there was also the high tackle on Cozzy on the wing. The Jordan free kick in the square, I thought he was, they were screaming out that, you're allowed to make the contest, but I don't think you're allowed to smack somebody in the head, and that's what actually happened. And also the double 50-metre penalty on Jordan. First one was 100% there, and I'm not sure what happened with I think he was penalised for talking back to the umpire, and I know this week they were hot. It wasn't just our game. This week they were very hot on the abuse to the umpires and getting 50 metres as a result. I saw it in another game, so I'm assuming there was a directive there. Essendon fans were livid. Do they have any right to be? Big man, you want to take a couple of those first?
But I'll just ask you fellas a question first. Sure. I'm spewing. I couldn't get a ticket. I just couldn't believe it. I was furious. So to watch it at home and have to listen to Darcy, it's like Brian Taylor and Darcy are going to haunt my nightmares. Was it as loud, the booing, as it seemed to be on television?
Yeah, it was louder.
It definitely was.
I couldn't believe it. It was really weird. It was a weird phenomenon. And so my opinion on those frees are that the one that I would have been furious is that was 100% a free kick against Harms. Like, that was definitely dropping the ball.
Yeah, we would have been screaming for a free.
Say again?
We would have been screaming for a free.
Yeah. Having said that, they've completely changed the rule on holding the ball this year. So it's not inconsistent with how they've been paying it, is it? But the 50 metres against, I forget it, the young player. that was there, and I was screaming at the telly, that's 50, because he took an age to get around, and that's what that 50 is actually there. That's what it's for, is to stop him moving, because he had to stop and wait till he got round on the mark. That was 100% there. And then on the telly, I'm not sure if you guys have watched the replay, but on the thingo, they showed the replay, and that 50 was for abuse. It could have also been paid for the fact that he wasn't running away from the zone. So I'm not sure if you could see it at the ground, but he was running all the way up. He's supposed to be, as that 50's happening, he's supposed to move well away, which he wasn't. And then he's given the umpire a mouthful, obviously. Complete lack of discipline. So they've got no one to complain about themselves for that. And then, again, if you haven't heard the replay, later on, that same umpire, I think, said to Devon with exasperation, Devon, stop yelling at me. I mean, that's just pathetic, really. From a leader of the club that they've brought in, that really is pathetic behaviour. And it sort of seemed to seep into the crowd with all of that booing. And then the one that you talk about, Andy, the one against Stringer on Jordan, they pay that 95 times out of 100, anyone going back with the flight of that, despite the fact he hit him in the head, they pay that almost all the time. Any contact in that manner, when the players are running back with the flight of it, they pay. It was a free kick every day of the week, and I just can't stand the way they're complaining about it. And the crowd, I thought it was pretty embarrassing for Essendon fans, to be honest.
Well, they were acting as if the free kick count was 25 to 8 or something. It was 15 to 10.
Mm.
Yeah, it was actually a very low number of umpiring, but it started right from the beginning. They were booing right from, I don't know what was going on. Maybe there was a bit of COVID angst or something.
I think it was just their expectations, having won 5 of their previous 6 games, that we're back to our entitled state, and this is ridiculous that you're not allowing us to do what we've got away with in the last couple of weeks. But Ben Man, you're absolutely right. It's no use complaining that a lot of those holding the ball ones were incorrectly called according to the rules of the book. The trouble is that the umpires aren't paying it at the moment. I watched a couple of other games on the weekend, and it was exactly the same. It was exactly what Clarkson was complaining about 6 or 8 weeks ago, that the tacklers aren't being rewarded for tackles which are perfect, effectively, that they'll just call play on, because that means they don't have to make a decision, if the truth be known. So for Essendon fans to finally realise what's being paid, and they should have known about the abuse calls. That's been the rule of the round, so to speak, as well. So that wasn't unexpected as well. So they'll have to live with it, because that's the way that it is being umpired at the moment, rightly or wrongly. That's what it is.
And again, for my pet hate for the commentators, they seem to feed into it. They seem to feed into this sort of narrative that the Bombers were being robbed. It's so frustrating watching it on television live when the commentary is poor, which it almost always is. It was great watching the VFL game because the commentary was all right. It was nothing's flash, but it didn't have any of that over the top hype. And you'd think that Stringer was the best player ever to have played football. He was pretty quiet on the night, and I thought looked a bit unfit, to be honest. But if you believe the commentators, he's the package. I just think I'd love some more balance around that stuff. And it's almost as if the people at the ground could hear the commentators egging them on about how unfair it was.
Yeah, Stringer was one of the laziest players that who's playing at the moment. His first goal was because he simply was stuck in the middle of the ground while the ball was up the other end, and they got a quick turnover that managed to get to him.
One of the few ones they got all day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and he didn't change the way he played the whole game. When he wandered, and I mean wandered down into the forward line, Hibbert picked him up, and he got nothing in there. I think in the previous week, most of his goals came from similar sorts of situations, where he's skirting the edges of packs, looking for cheapies. He doesn't go and get his own ball unless it lands in his lap, and he just wanders around the ground. It was interesting. I was watching him even in the warm-ups before the game, where other players are, sprinting back and forth. He's sort of taking 3 or 4 sprint-type steps and then slowing up to walk to finish the run-through. He's just inherently like that. He's not fit, and
I hope they waste 800 grand a year on him.
Yeah, it'd be good.
I get the impression that he's somehow involved in giving himself the nickname The Package. Wouldn't be surprised. We've got a caller on the line. I believe it's our good friend Terence. Good evening, Terence. How are you doing?
Doing well, Andy. Thank you for this opportunity. I've got a little run sheet so I don't keep asking follow-on questions. So I'm glad that we're talking a little bit about the media. That's what I wanted to bring up. And I'm always a bit conscious when to call in because I don't want to break the flow. So there are a couple of things. One went back to last week during the mid-review I would have liked to have talked about from a media point of view. I think it's died a natural death when I saw Jackson being interviewed by Ben Gibson the other day, but I was really annoyed with Tom Morris. I mean, I don't like Tom Morris as a interviewer or reporter anyway, but putting that aside, when he broke the story in inverted commas that Luke Jackson was really unhappy and, wanted to go back to WA and missed all of his friends and so on, I just wondered, is that kind of unnecessary and unhelpful type of commentary? And then during the game, with the Essendon game, whether it was me or not, I noticed that we had 6 minutes to go in the second quarter before the commentators said anything really, interesting about a Melbourne player, it seemed to me. And they were lauding the fact that Jackson's a terrific player. So, but that's 6 minutes left in the second quarter. All of the commentary in the first quarter and a good part of the second quarter, at least to me anyway, when I watched the replay, was all about, Jones and this one and Cox and so on, and Stringer, as you guys have been talking about anyway. And I know that Max has said that one of the things that's important for us is to gain respect from the community, but I really don't feel as though we're getting that at the moment. And then just to finish that off, with the first crack that the Bin Man was talking about on Sunday night, David King said, well, Melbourne's got to win their grand final this year because after that, the next 3 or 4 years are going to be the Dogs. So again, I find that really frustrating that we just don't seem to be getting the respect. And so I'm just interested in what you guys think about that. I've got one or two other little points after your comments, Andy.
Well, I didn't listen to the commentary. I watched the KO Mini replay, but that's really just highlights. So I didn't get a sense of that. So Bin Man might be able to answer that in terms of, I don't know what King's talking about the next few years of the Bulldogs, and it might be, but everyone's talking the Bulldogs this year as being the thing and not giving us the respect. And I'm not saying we should be the only ones talking about in terms of premiership, but Bulldogs are definitely the darlings at the moment in the media for who they think is going to win the flag. So I don't know where King's coming from, and surely will be in the equation next year as long as we're fit. Bin Man, can you talk about the commentary? Is that right?
Yeah, working back with the first one, I didn't hear that, Tom Morris. I just saw some comment on Demoland. I thought it was a joke. But that's the first time I've heard that, actually. For me, that just fits into the, people criticise Caroline Wilson. I'm a huge Caroline Wilson fan. And that sort of model of reporting on football, she's the best at it, the politics of football. But, there's so much content that needs to be filled. And then Tom Morris's and Tom Brown and, what's his name, Sam McClure, they're just gossip mongers and they don't really, that's not, what sort of news is that? A young man's,
but where did they get
his first career at a club that's premiership favourite on top of the ladder wants to go home, please.
Where's he getting that? Is that just conjecture or does he think that that's a scoop?
I mean, that's what frustrates me about that sort of reporting because they just blame their sources. I don't know, that's what I was told.
Because
so it's nonsense.
I did see someone post on social media somewhere one of Jackson's Instagram stories, and that's just like one of those things that after 24 hours it's a post that goes away. It was a picture of him from his waist down, and he had shoes on that were the Eagles colours. They were yellow with a blue stripe on it. I don't know if it was an Adidas or something shoe or a Nike shoe that had those colours. So it's very possible that Tom Morris took the story based on that Instagram post. I wouldn't be surprised.
And Tom Morris is a Melbourne
Yeah,
fan,
do it,
and
please.
it's worth remembering that he got, I'm pretty right in saying, that didn't he used to do the Melbourne podcast?
Yes.
The Melbourne FC
Yeah.
podcast, and he got taken off it?
Yeah, because of some leaking or
Yeah.
or something.
So I think that shows where the
Legend.
club at. On the commentators, not, you know, I don't know about that. Like maybe there is that element. I guess a long, 50 years of no success breeds a certain amount of enmity towards us. For me, it's a feature of my pet hate is how many ex-footballers dominate football commentary. And so someone like Darcy's grown up, he's played a career playing against the D's. He probably hated them as a footy club. And so it comes across. Same with Brian Taylor. He clearly has some sort of issue with Melbourne Football Club. I think actually the model we play, it's just not a very... How exciting is it to watch another team get strangled? So much more exciting to see those young players running down the ground. And, so how often can you say, geez, this Melbourne system is impressive? Someone like Bartel, he loves it. Someone like on that show, Terence, the first crack, Montagna, he really loves the Melbourne system. So if you love that type of football and good coaching and good structure, well, then you're a fan of the Demons. But they're not as exciting, obviously, as a Bulldogs, the way they move the ball. And in terms of that, I heard that comment as well. I watched First Crack, and his point was how good the Dogs are. They've got Norton and their age demographics, and that it's essentially sort of implied they're going to win 3 of the next 5 flags. That they're set up for a dynasty, is what he said. Well, it's a funny sort of thing for a fella who knows lists as well as he supposedly does. Arguably, we've got a much better age demographic than him. We just talked about. We've got 4 players who are getting the Rising Star nominations this year. We've got a really young team. We've got, it was amazing to watch Jackson, all the talk about Jackson. It's his 19th game he just played. He's 19 and he's taking 43, 44% ruck time. When's the last time that happened in the AFL? That's probably only Nat Nui would be anywhere similar to those sorts of numbers. We've got a great demographic to set up for the next 5-6 years. So if I was the Dogs, I'd be worried about the Demons, not us worried about them.
We were actually younger than the Baby Bombers, or this incarnation of the Baby Bombers that they're going on about. So we were younger by a month average. Terence,
I have one.
Go on.
I have one last one, and I know I keep talking about Fritz. It's not a man love or anything like that, but I do want to applaud the fact I know he didn't score, and Binman in a gentle way stole one of mine. I really loved the 2 beautiful left foot kicks he did. One, he was, I want to say, the centre of the ground, and he kicked to Langdon, and it was just a beautiful left foot kick, really low, hit Langdon on the chest. And as I recall, I think that was the one that resulted in a Luke Jackson goal. I might be wrong, when Langdon kicked it into the forward line. And then the other one was the one that Binman mentioned, was just a short but really precise left foot kick into Petrarca. So although he didn't score, he was involved in 2 score involvements, which I thought were really quite spectacular. So my last comment was, I'm a bit embarrassed to say, put it down to my 70 years, when the game first started and I saw number 7 on the ground, because I have no one to talk to about this, I thought, who the heck's number 7? Where's he coming from? So I'm a bit embarrassed to say that, so you probably won't let me call in again, Andy, but when I realised
that out, Terence.
Oh my God, I'm in really big trouble. So gentlemen, I'll leave it there, but thanks very much for the opportunity, okay?
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Terence. Appreciate
Awesome.
the call. That was Terence. All right, let's move on to the GWS game, in particular the changes. Binman, you say Ben Brown won't be in this week.
Won't's a bit strong. I reckon there's a good
Possibly.
chance he won't be. I reckon the one change this week will be Jones in, because he was simply fantastic. He was brilliant. Goody made a point about, when talking about Wiedemann and Brown in the presser, that they will reward players in form. That's what will guide their selection policy.
Who comes out?
I think, unfortunately for the young fella, Captain Jack's probably the one, as well as he played. But he's the obvious sort of swap, I would have thought. That's tough on him, but he'll get his chances again, and it's a tough game. AFL, I saw our injury report this week. We've got 3 players on the injury list, and they're Hoare, Nitsky, and Tomlinson. That's it.
Yeah.
So we've got pretty much a full AFL list. He's a 21-year-old kid. He'll get his chances. So I just think they'll have to reward it. He was awesome in that game, Jones. The best I've seen him play for ages. Kicked a beautiful goal, played smart, brought other players into the thing. If you read Richardson's comment about that, it's really interesting because I think he gives a real tell about, one, who they selected to talk about, and 2, how he talks about it. And he mentioned exactly what I'd put on Demon Land, that Jones just showed such great leadership in that game. So I think he'll come in for Sparrow, and that'll be the only change. Maybe Brown. He kicked 5-3, played well. They were happy with his movement. I just think they'll give him one more week to try and get him cherry ripe.
Could you? And I'm just playing devil's advocate because I didn't really see much of the reserves game, and not taking anything away from Jones's 32 or 35 possessions. But I'm just looking at the ladder, the VFL ladder now, and I see Essendon have only won 2 games and are sitting 19th out of 22 teams, and the 3 teams below aren't AFL listed teams, so they're the lowest AFL listed teams. Does that take any gloss off even Ben Brown's and Jones's games?
Not really. I saw pretty well most of the game. The Jones's efforts were just fantastic. I think it wasn't only 32 plus possessions, 18 of them were contested, if I remember. He was just in everything. It was as good a Jones game as I've seen in the previous 300. He was just fantastic, regardless of the opposition. It was the difference between AFL level players and VFL level players, and he was a complete standout. So he'll certainly be in the I would imagine in the first 22 this week. I think Ben Brown will come in. I wouldn't be surprised, though, that given that last week we brought Viney in and didn't take a mid out, that we've now got an excess of mids. And I think the one who might fall out is A and B. I know Goody loves him, but when you've got players who are seriously in form, knocking the doors down, you can't keep refusing them. A and B does a lot of running, but he's not the player that you want with the ball in hand at the moment. So I think he might easily drop out. He didn't have a great deal of effect this week, but I think we do need to bring Ben Brown into the side. We just need that extra tall up there that we've spoken about before. And I think you'll also see players like Fritsch come better when you've got a Ben Brown in there, that when he's not taking the second best defender as he had to this week, he'll suddenly become a target again.
Like the North Melbourne game where he kicked 5, being in that situation.
Yeah.
6, I think he kicked in that game.
Yeah. Now, we talked a few weeks ago about resting players. We're talking around the bye. Is now still big man? Is that on our radar? Do you reckon guys like Cozzy, are they in line to maybe have a rest? He didn't really do much this week. Would you give him a rest? Would you give anyone a rest?
You know what? Not now. I would have thought that the go was Collingwood and Essendon. Like, that's the structure around it, because now we're getting into the meat of the season, aren't we? Maybe, if you are going to rest a player, this is the week, not paying any, not disrespecting GWS at all. But if they are thinking about it, they've got to do it in the next week or two, because they've got to have their best finals team in the last 4 or 5 games to get some synergy together and to get their best 22. So, I mean, Cozzy wasn't great, was he? He works hard. He wasn't great against Collingwood either, for that matter. Maybe he does need to freshen up. I can't say. I think if they were going to do it, it was Collingwood, rest him for that game, and even the Essendon game. So, they've been pretty consistent of playing their best 22, and I reckon they will. I can't see I honestly can't see Nibbler coming out ever. I reckon Harms is more at risk than Nibbler. just because how structurally, and I mean, that would be really harsh on Harms as well, because, he's become an important player. He's played well. He can do the tagging role when needed. But I just think structurally Nibbler's too important, but, someone's got to come out. So if you bring two players in, someone's going to come out, obviously. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting, Andy, to see whether they rest anyone. And Cozzy probably could do with a rest. He looks not quite on, does he?
He was at the game. He was certainly as annoying as he normally is to the opposition. He's doing a lot of work that you probably don't see in on the television. But it will be interesting what they decide to do this week. Harms was my next choice to drop out. If he's doing a tagging role, well, he did a pretty poor one on Merritt and who was the other mid this week? Merritt and Parrish.
Yeah, I don't reckon they tagged though.
No, they didn't. They didn't. The truth is they didn't tag. But if that's the case, why do you need Jones and Viney in there as well? Do you really need a Harms as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. I think one of the things about Nibbler, Spargo and Cozzy is that, and Fritter to a lesser degree, is that it's really important to understand how much running they do and up the ground. So often when they get the ball, they're spent. Like they're spent when they're kicking the ball, which is, so not only do they do lots of defensive running, and they're really important from that perspective, they're running back up to the defence and back to the forward line. So when they do get their ball in the forward line, they're often just completely out of gas. And Fritter is a fair bit of defensive running as well. So, they've obviously big sort of selection headaches in that regard.
Nice to have, though.
Yeah, it's nice to have. I think that's what I haven't seen it yet, but that's what Stafford's suggesting in the text that I've seen for that video.
Now, in terms of manning up, Toby Green, he gave us a bit of a headache last time. I think he kicked 5. Who are we going to man up on him? Does Hibbert get the job or somebody else? Do they try Hunt? No, not sure he's good enough for Toby Green.
Hunt, and May's got to play on him. May's the only one strong enough. He's an absolute star, and like he'll cut anyone up. I reckon May's the only one strong enough to go with him overhead. Who played on him last time? Do you remember? Either of you guys?
I don't know.
Was he injured the last time?
I have a feeling he might have missed that game.
Yeah.
As in May?
May,
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Toby Green kicked 5, didn't he, in that game against the sub at Canberra?
He did.
Can't remember. Yeah.
We can go back to the tape and listen to what we said.
I don't think you can put anybody on Toby Green. You put on a small, he'll outrun them. You put on a tall, he'll outjump them. He is just simply a brilliant player who will give him 5 possessions and he'll get 5 goals. He's that brilliant. All you've got to do is limit the other players in the side. If Toby kicks 5 and nobody else gets anything, then you win the game. So, but he's just a brilliant, brilliant player.
And he's the sort of player, George, in that situation, exactly as you say, even though we're dominated, when you get to 11 points, random things can happen. And he's the sort of player that can make a random thing happen and win a game off his own boot in that situation because he's a gun, isn't he?
Yeah.
Now, if you recall, last time we played them, it was in round 3. They used De Boer on Clary, just was hassling him all night, just getting into his face, putting him off his game. And I think, Clary didn't have a great game that night. So is there any way we can sort of negate that? Is that where you sort of use a Harms to sort of, intercept him at the stoppages?
That's where you use a Viney.
Oh, Viney, I forgot about Viney.
And that's something that we've missed because, that's what Viney will do. If Viney gets instruction to tackle and hit and smash into De Boer, then he'll do that from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. I can't recall. I don't think Viney was playing in that game up in Sydney and Canberra from memory.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's exactly that's one of the things they've missed. And it's interesting in that VFL game, George, how well Vander's played, and he plays a similar style. Like, that he just targets players' body and he tackles good. So that's, I think come finals he's a chance, as I said last week, to get in, just because Goody loves that sort of player who's going to put on hurt, basically.
Yeah, totally agree with that. That was as good a game I've seen from Vanders. It was like his game in the 2018 finals. He just pushed players aside, and he was the only one who was going to get the ball at times. And I loved his last goal that he gave to Ben Brown in the end, where he intercepted at the 50-metre mark. But
he read that well, didn't he?
He read that brilliant. More importantly, he was fit.
Yeah, and he's moving well. He seems to be moving really well, like as good as I've seen him. So, he could be a real wild card, and, Goody loves him, and for good reason. And like in terms of come finals, you need players who are going to break tackles and go through them.
Yeah. Interestingly, I had a look at a little bit at the Hawks GWS game from last week. Hawthorn demolished them. It was... The scoreboard might be a little bit generous to them in that respect, but Hawthorn beat them in every single statistic except for centre clearances, and we've learnt that centre clearances don't mean all that much.
Thanks, but, George.
The only thing that they exceeded them on was turnovers. So GWS managed 78 turnovers in the game to Hawthorn's 66. So the only thing they really won for the whole game effectively was a negative type of statistic. Yep.
Sorry, Josh.
Yeah, so that was interesting. The other interesting thing, and I think the big positive for us, was Mumford wasn't playing in this game. I can't remember why, whether he's been injured again or he's just suspended. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But without Mumford, they're a completely different side. Mumford just effectively throws himself at the opposition ruckman, and we're really dependent on Gawn getting first hands on the ball and around the ground in particular. But if Mumford's not there this week, it'll be a big positive for us.
Well,
I was going to say on
Mumford
the back of your comments.
Sorry, Joe. Mumford didn't play the last time we played them either. Go ahead, George. Go ahead, B-Man.
So I was going to say that on the back of your comments, George, is that they're a funny team to watch from a sort of game plan and tactics, GWS, because, if you wanted to boil it down to their identifiable brand, it's win the contest. Now, that's the same for us and same for Bulldogs, same for any club, I guess. But there's not much else. And if they lose the contest, they get beaten, because structurally they don't move the ball very well. Like, we're Melbourne, I love watching us play, because we've got this balance now between a defensive strong, but we're not, as boring, say, as the Pies were under Malthouse, which were ultra defensive, or even the D's under Roos for that matter, because, and we're also getting our tempo game. When they did push in the second quarter, we slowed that game up really cleverly, I thought. But then we combine that with some really sort of high wire type ball movement down the boundary line with lots of handballs and getting it forward and exciting contests. And GWS don't have that. And they've sort of always been stuck with that, having so many players with high skills, that using their skills to move the ball, because they were such brilliant kicks. So they had Kelly, and they've always had really good kicks, and still they've got a few, but they just haven't got enough anymore for that model to be, that orange tsunami they talk about is really based on brilliant precision kicking, moving it forward. They still want to get it moving forward. They're a territory team, but if they lose the contest, they're in trouble. I mean, similarly for us, I guess, but we've got other ways of putting a score together other than just meat and potatoes winning a contest. And I saw a bit of that game too, George, and for a team, they win that game, they're in the finals. They're in the 8, and they let a sort of young Hawks team bully them basically. So I suspect that's not good for us, because they'll come out hard, you'd expect. they're in the second week in Melbourne, so that's going to be tough for them. But I reckon beware that, because I think that they'll be stung by that. Cameron will have gone through them like those assaults, and I'll expect that they'll come out hard. But Melbourne's a hard team to bludgeon into submission, I reckon.
So Mumford went out. He went out the week before last week, injured, but he's not listed on their injury list as being injured. So I'm not sure what's happening there, if that's an omission and he's not on it, or
Terence just noted in the chat room that Maxi reckons that he's going to come in this week. So those two have had a history. So
and
hopefully he doesn't get hit round the head again.
Their injury list is Caniglio, who injured his ankle against us, I believe, the last time, is listed as a test. So I'm not sure whether he's coming in or not. The other thing, you said Viney wasn't playing last time we played them, and in fact was, but May did not. That May that was the week he was out with that eye socket injury.
Yeah, I reckon. I can, because Green plays almost as a true full forward, doesn't he, George? Like, he plays out of the square. He leads, pushes up hard, but he plays almost as a true full forward. And I think May's the obvious one. He'll be way too strong for Petty. They don't want Lever on him. They want Lever sort of free and intercepting. So, and I reckon he's a little bit. This is no disrespect to Hibbert. He's probably got Hibbert's measure, so May's the only one I'd be really confident of matching.
Anything else in regards to that game? You want to talk about tactics or anything?
Just as I say, I'm just so pleased I got a ticket. And it was hard because I was going with friends, but I couldn't get multiple tickets. So I eventually said, sorry, I'm going to have to get a solo ticket, because there were single tickets you could get, but not any more than one. So I'm just rapt to be going to the footy. I think, as I said, I think they'll come out pretty hard. They're a hard footy team. I like the Giants. I got a lot of time for them. I really hope they do well as a footy club. I'm looking forward to a good contested match. It would be great, as we talked about last week, it would be great to get on top, take our chances early, and, not to grind out a 12-point, 15-point, 25-point win. It'd be nice to put a team away.
Oh, I've been saying that all year. That's my one wish. One game where I can just sit back and enjoy and not be nervous the whole time. Is it back to 85? It's 85%.
Not till Friday, and so that's why I think that they've only released the 25,000 tickets now, and then it's not till July 1 that they do that, and so then presumably they'll release more tickets on the Friday should the government, but the government hasn't announced formally that it's gone to 85% yet.
Well,
hence no tickets.
I don't think we'll be expecting 85,000 people at that game anyway.
No, but so I wanted to get my ticket just in case there is a one COVID on Thursday. But the other thing is going to be wet. That's the prediction, is to be slippery. So that sort of, I'm not sure what that means for probably helps us, because we like to sort of get it forward, but hopefully it's not too wet.
Nothing else about this game, but wasn't it nice to be able to see we had 20 listed players playing with Casey, and wasn't it nice to be able to see for the first time, effectively for us, people like Rosman and Bowie and even the return of Vandenberg and Jones playing the way he did. But what really impressed me about it was while it's just words that come from the coaching staff about informed players and players need to prove themselves, just how much work that people like Wiedemann and Melksham appeared to be doing in this game.
I thought Melksham was really good.
Yeah, Vandenberg again, just how he was just relentless the whole game, and this is what's the message seems to be getting through, that if you want to be in this senior side, and we're certainly challenging for the ultimate prize this year, if you want to get into that side before the end of the season, you're going to have to work real hard. And it's interesting to see how hard some of those players were working compared to what certainly I was seeing at the AFL level when they had their opportunities.
Yeah, I thought Melksham really jumped out. and also Weed as well. Fair play to him. And Melksham tackled. He had 4 tackles, I think. Worked hard up and ground. He was I think he pretty much played as a mid, sort of halfback or half forward mid. Kicked a beautiful left foot kick up the field off his left to a forward's advantage on the half forward flank. And for me, I thought, having butchered so many inside 50s that we did, missing targets, that's why he's if he plays with any level of intensity, he'll come back into that team come final. So, again, I'm not sure he's going to come out, but, I think they want him in for exactly that. So I was pretty impressed, and I thought Bowie was good too. WA Demon Boy asks in the thread about, who we might need to trade in next year, or do we think that guys like Bowie and Laurie are developing nicely? And personally, I think, though, that's the first time I've seen Laurie. I love, we've talked about this before, but I love that how natural a footballer Bowie, Laurie, even Rosman, who's got a bit of X factor. But that was the first time, obviously, I'd seen is it Duncan that we drafted in?
Yeah, well, it would have been his first game because we haven't played.
Yeah, and DeCleese, they look like natural footballers. They look like kids who play footy. What were your thoughts on trading in terms of, do you think we need to sort of trade any sort of big player in, or just keep going through the draft?
Well, I'm not sure I don't even know what our situation is in terms of money-wise, whether we have money to go after a big target or someone position-wise. Selfish. I'd love to be in the conversation to get Chera from Freo, who Carlton seem to have their mitts on. That'd be fantastic to have Langdon on one wing and him on the other one, but I don't think that's gonna happen. But I don't know. I'm sort of happy with the way we've drafted. We've got a good hit rate in the last few years, so I'm prepared to back them. But it'd be nice to go after someone if we need to fill a position.
I think the danger is, as football fans, and it keeps Demonland going for 3 or 4 months of the year with all sorts of draft proposals and what we should have been getting and what we could get and how much we're going to pay for them and things like that, is that we've got 40-plus players at the moment who are challenging for 22 holes come the end of the year. I can't see any glaring weakness that requires us to fill with a player of high calibre that we're not going to spend an awful lot of money on. We've seen plenty of examples over the year, Buckley at Collingwood, Judd at Carlton, even Carlton again with Sard and Williams this year, spending a lot of money and getting very little results for. I'm prepared to back Jason Taylor to pick out someone who's got the quality and the talents to fit in with the team that we've got, rather than trying to create something from the ground level up. I'd be sticking with what we got and keep on developing the people like the Bowies, who to me looks like a ready-made replacement for that small defender role. He's already taking kick-ins at case level. He's that quality disposer of the ball. These are the holes as you progressively replace. He'll be replacing probably Nev Jetta when towards the end of the year. We've got a couple of other players who'll be getting to that stage in their career, and we've got a few who obviously haven't made the mark, but keep developing, keep bringing the players through. That was the Hawthorn model that got them 3 premierships in a row. So, I think we should be following the same route.
I totally agree, and I think that's why the sort of comment about the Dogs, being in a sort of window where they could win 3 or 4. As I said, we've got a fantastic list demographic. We've got some high-end talent that's around the 26, 27 mark. Jones is our oldest player, I think, isn't he? He's sort of, but he's an outlier in terms of age. Maybe Hibbard's 28, and then maybe Melksham too. But then, the rest is 26 down. I think, Taylor has really done a great job in filling those holes, and they've given Taylor his head to a degree. And I read on, I think it was the MFC site a few weeks back, or perhaps somewhere else, is that there's a young ruckman that we might be able to get through the academy. George, you probably know more about that, but that sounds, quality player who we might be able to get through that system. That's probably the one area who's going to come up behind Max Gawn.
Yeah, I think the deal with that guy is as long as he's not a top 20, he's ours. Right. So, and as we know, ruckmen do take a bit longer to develop. Just on your point with the Bulldogs, I think the hype around them isn't just so much on their current team, which obviously that contributes to that, but the fact that they've still got that Jamara waiting to come in, as well as them having first dibs at Darcy's son, who's been kicking bags at school level, and was
kicked six in the
Metro.
Yeah.
So
I think that's right.
That's
exactly
sort of
right.
them talking about dynasties in terms of that, but they were talking about GWS and dynasties, and that didn't really go anywhere. So things can turn around very quickly in the AFL world. But just and the last one thing on Bowie, another thing I was impressed with, he's really courageous as well. I saw him sort of fly back in a pack to spoil in backline for such a small guy. You like to see that stuff, so I'm excited for him.
He looks good.
Yeah. All right, boys. I think we're going to end it there. Thank you.
Just one final thing, Andy, just
it.
about the VFL game.
Yep.
Just wanted to shout out to Neville Jetta. I can't recall ever loving a player at the Melbourne Footy Club as much as Neville Jetta. And it was great watching him play. It was great watching him sort of just the way he is with the younger players. Such a great person to have at the footy club. I'm so pleased that, of course he didn't go to Collingwood, but that, I'm really hoping that they can find a role for him when he does retire. And on that, the replays, I watched the replay of the last quarter. I watched the first 3 quarters live and watched the sort of second half again on the telecast. It started, for some reason, 3 minutes into the game, and it finished 2 minutes short. And so, he had a shot at goal at one point. I thought, it would have been nice if he kicked a goal. And then on the MFC side, they've got all the VFL goals. And he kicks the last goal of the game running through the centre and kicks from, 50, 40 metres out direct and kicks a beautiful goal. And just the way his teammates embraced him, it was one that was fantastic to watch, but it just really warmed my heart to see how much his teammates love him. Jones was in there and, it seemed like there was about 10 players hugging him and it was just fantastic. So, just wanted to shout out to Nev.
One of the things, we talk about heartening to see, one of the best things I saw from that game was both Jones and Jetta in the middle of the ground for a centre ball up. It was a great sight to see. All right, I think we're going to leave it there for this week. Thank you to B-Man, thank you George, and thank you Terence for calling in. And we'll be back next week to talk about the GWS game. Go Demons.
Go Redlegs.
Come on, Demons. Come on.